In reading today, we have some success criteria.
Today, you are going to work on retelling folk tales, which include fables and tall tales from diverse cultures, and identify the themes in these works. We're going to focus specifically today on retelling these folk tales. In order to retell a folk tale, you'll need to be able to define what retell is. Don't get scared, you're very familiar. You'll also need to be able to identify and infer the main idea of a text with details that can prove your thinking. When we retell a fiction text, we can think of it as the main idea for a nonfiction text. What are the main things that happened and why did they happen? Also, you'll need to use vocabulary to help you with this goal today. You will need to describe texts and events. You will talk about characters' traits and their motivations. How do they behave and why do they do this? You'll also need to think about the characters' feelings. What emotions are they experiencing throughout the text? Finally, you'll need to think about their actions. What is it that these characters do? All of these ideas put together will give you the plot of a story. Take a look at the next slide to see what plot is and discuss with your class.
So we have reviewed what plot is. Plot is the beginning, the middle, and the end of a fiction story. You can think of it like a mountain or like a roller coaster. So at the beginning of a plot, we will set up the characters and the setting. Who are the characters and where are they? Then you have the buildup. What do the characters need to do? And what is going on in this story? Then we get to the problem. There is normally a big problem that the characters are dealing with. Something that the character is struggling with or the character has to figure out. Then we see the resolution. How do the characters solve the problem or respond to this event? What do the characters do about this problem? And finally, we have the ending. How does the story wrap up? How does it end? What do the characters do? Today, you will be using this type of language as you study folk tales and retell them using the plot. Today, we're going to start with a plot video from vocabulary as we talk about the elements in a story.
A plot's not anything but a sequence of events. And every story has a plot, because a story without a plot is like a fish out of water. Or like pancakes without syrup. Or like a shoe without some laces. You wouldn't wear shoes without laces, would you? Would you? You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup, that's the conclusion. Make your plot hot, and you're never losing. Let's take a second now to focus on plot. You want to learn to tell a cool story or not? The beginning of the story is the introduction. We get to meet the characters, find out something about the main conflict or main problem. We're dying to know how the characters will solve them. The conflict unravels in 3 phases. Rising action is the first stage. It's the middle of the story where you build suspense. Whatever the problem is, it gets intense until the turning point hits. That's called the climax. The character changes, accepts new facts, and may have to make a choice based on what happened. The tension decreases, that's the falling action with the conflict resolved. You can wrap up loose ends in the last section that we call the conclusion. You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup, yup, that's the conclusion. Make your plot hot and you're never losing. Let's break down the plot of a story called The Date, with two characters who are not the same. In the introduction, Joe says he's not popular. That's an important fact about his character. The conflict, he wants to date a popular girl. Her name is Lisa and she's out of this world. She only dates jocks, but he still makes the offer when he asks Lisa out on a date to Red Lobster. She says yes, and the plot thickens. The rising action adds a little tension, but then Joe is grossed out by the way she chooses the climax. That information is new. It's a turning point for Joe and things change after. Their relationship ending is the falling action. So the resolution to this conflict or conclusion is Joe and Lisa didn't stick. You got a story to tell, you better have a plot. If it doesn't, am I listening? No, I'm not. First, introduce the conflict and characters, then the action rises. It may get scarier, the climax is when things go nuts. The action falls away, then we wrap it up. Yup, yup, that's the conclusion. Make your plot hot and you're never losing.
All right, go ahead and join me on Seesaw, please. To find our task today, you will click on Activities, Assign to Class folder, Red ELA. And our task today is called, How do I retell a story? We know we've been talking about this idea that stories have a plot. How do I retell it? Well, we start with the beginning, and we go to the middle, then we go to the end. All of these are important parts of a plot. Please click Add Response to open our task for today. We're going to begin by rereading this story from last week. Our text today is called Ant and the Grasshopper. We read it last week, and a lot of us knew this story already. We're familiar with it. Today, we're going to retell the plot of a story that we know. So step number 1 says to reread the text from last week. Then, as you listen, you're going to think about the plot. Use this graphic to help you. So as I read this familiar story, I want you thinking about the plot. What is the beginning? What is the middle? What is the end? Go back to your vocabulary and think about who are the characters? What's the setting? What's the problem? And how do they fix the problem? How do they resolve it? So I'm going to be the reader, and students are going to be listening and thinking about how would you retell this plot? How would you use our mountain example to say the plot? Here we go. Ant and the Grasshopper. One sunny summer day, Ant was hard at work gathering food and bringing it back to his home to be stored away for the winter. While taking a brief rest from carrying an acorn, he heard the most beautiful music. Looking around, Ant spotted Grasshopper leaning against a rock, playing his violin. Ant approached him and complimented him. "Why, you make some fine music with your instrument." "Why, thank you," replied Grasshopper with pride. "Come join me. We could have fun and dance and enjoy these beautiful days together. Though the offer sounded tempting, Aunt replied, I can't. I'm busy storing up food for the winter. And with a warning, Aunt said, I suggest you do the same, for winter is just around the corner. Not too thrilled about the idea of working, Grasshopper replied, Oh, Aunt, can't you see? There is plenty to eat in these fields, and winter is far from a splendid day like today. The season will change before you know it, cautioned Aunt as he picked up his acorn and trudged his way home with the load. Soon the weather turned cold, and Grasshopper woke to find the field that was once plentiful with food buried under a blanket of snow. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to dig down deep enough to reach it. Oh, what will I do now? Cried Grasshopper in despair. And it was then that Grasshopper remembered the friend he had met in the peak of summer. So off to Aunt's house he went in hopes of finding food and shelter. When Aunt answered his door, he found a very cold and hungry Grasshopper. Grasshopper pleaded, Oh, Aunt, please let me in and share your warm home and good food. Sadly, Aunt replied, I've only stored up enough for my family and me. Sorry, friend, but I warned you of this day. I wish you had heeded my warning. And then Aunt closed the door. Okay, we have reread the text. You have listened to the story. And now I want you thinking about the plot. Think about this mountain example. First, we have the beginning. Who are the characters in the setting? Then we have the build-up. What's going on? Is there going to be a problem? Then we have the problem. Oh no. What is going on with the characters? Then we have the resolve. How do they fix the problem? Or how do they respond to the problem? And then the wrap-up, the ending. How does the story end? We are going to get with a partner and we are going to retell the story. Using only our words, you don't need to type anything. We're just going to retell the story in our own words, using this mountain graphic to help us. Okay, let's go ahead and get with our partners. After you got to just talk with your partner, now it's time for us to fill out a graphic organizer on side number 2. With your group, you're going to use the same mountain graphic to retell the plot. This time you can retell by typing words. Your questions match the mountain graphic. The first box says, who are the characters? Where are they? That matches characters and setting. Then it says, what do the characters need to do? What goes wrong? That matches the buildup. What do they need to do? What goes wrong in this story? Then, what is the big event? Remember, vocabulary talked about the word climax. That's when the tension builds up and you're like, oh no, what is the big problem? And that matches the top of the mountain. What is the big event? What is the problem that the characters face? Then you have the resolve. How do the characters respond? Do they fix the problem? Or what did they do after they realized the problem? And finally, our ending. How does the story end? What happens at the end? What's the last event that the author closes with? I want you to type with your partner a sentence into each section. Typing a third grade sentence into each section. It doesn't need to be more than one sentence. So you should have 5 complete sentences when you're done with this slide. Okay? I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to work with your group. 7 minutes. That means you have about 1 minute per sentence. So you're focusing, come up with an idea, type it. Ready? You may begin. Okay. Today, your independent task is to do the same skill, but with a different folktale. Remember, a folktale is a story that people tell. So if you look on slide 3, you will see a new folktale called The Ant and the Dove. Today, you are going to follow these steps. You're going to read the fable. As you read, you're going to think about the plot. Then you're going to retell the story to yourself using our mountain graphic: beginning, build up, problem, resolve, ending. And then you're going to record yourself answering this question. What were the most important moments? You need to follow all of these steps on slide number 3. Then you will show your knowledge on slide number 4. You have the exact same graphic organizer to organize your thinking. Who are the characters? Where are they? What do the characters need to do? What's going wrong? What is the big event? What's the big problem? How do the characters respond or solve the problem? And how does the story end? You need to show your knowledge and follow these steps on slide number 4. When you are finished, you will turn in with the green check and think about how successful were you today with retelling the plot. Were you able to retell a folktale today using key details from the text? I want you thinking about that today as you learn.